We have installed a Chinese radio in a 2009 Opel Astra H. This car has a navigator and multifunction steering wheel. The radio has 4 core processors, with 1 GB of RAM and 16 GB of ROM. A modified version of Android 10 is installed. It was purchased from Amazon, which implies a 1-year warranty. This model has a lag of a few years. Newer radios have PX5 or PX6 processors. They are quite a bit faster and enjoy good software support on the XDA forums. They are also more expensive. The radio we have bought has an ISO adapter, a set of RCA jacks for video signal, another set of RCA jacks for sound signal, a radio antenna adapter and amplifier, a GPS antenna, 2 USB cables, a CAN bus to decode the signals from the multifunction steering wheel, an adapter for an external microphone, a rear-view camera, and an RCA male-to-male cable to transmit the video signal and power the camera on. We are not going to use the adapter for external microphones, because the built-in microphone that the radio has is good enough. We will not use the GPS antenna either, since our car has its own GPS antenna. To use our GPS antenna on this radio, we have to buy a male FACRA to male SMA connector. Later, we will make the connection to connect the GPS antenna of the car to this radio. We plug the USB cables, which will help us to charge the mobile by the radio, to use the mirror function of the mobile with the radio, and to use external USB flash drives. We plug the connectors that will let us to use the rear view camera. First, we connect the RCA and power males to the corresponding females on the camera. Then we connect the RCA connector to the video input of the radio. The RCA connector on the radio where the camera is plugged, is labeled as camera. Finally, we solder the cable from the ISO socket that will supply power to the rear view camera. The wire from the ISO socket used for this purpose is labeled as reverse. Regarding the connection of the antenna for the radio, it brings a signal amplifier that must be powered. Therefore, we solder the wire that is labeled as ANT on the antenna cable, with the wire that has the same label on the ISO connector. Remember that, to use the DVD drive, you must first remove 2 screws on the top cover of the radio. We have bought a tool in AliExpress to extract the original car radio. The rods must be inserted into the 4 holes of the radio, over almost their entire length. We will not be able to remove the original radio until we hear a click in each hole. When we take out the radio, we see a blue FACRA Type-C connector, which corresponds to the car's GPS antenna. We also see a white FACRA Type-C connector, which corresponds to the radio antenna. We also see the ISO power socket and a data cable for the navigator that we will no longer use. The car's navigator will no longer be available, so we will use the navigator that we install on our Android radio. Google Maps is installed by default. When we remove all the connectors from the original radio, we will plug the ISO connector of the radio with the ISO socket of the car. The ISO socket of the car has a tab that must be turned before removing the cable. With the ISO socket and CAN bus already in place, we check that the radio powers on, and that it turns off and on when we start the car. The radio has a power button on the left wheel. By pressing the button, we turn the radio on for the first time. If we turn the car off with the radio still on, it will turn on again when we start the car. In addition, we verify that the multifunction steering wheel still operates on the car's onboard computer, and that it also operates on the radio. We make a hole in the left side of the glove compartment of the car. We use this hole to pass through the male-to-male RCA cable for the camera, along with both USB cables. We prepare the last connections for the camera. We connect the red wire that is next to the RCA connector, with the red wire of the power connector of the camera. The black wire can be left loose, because the RCA cable will close the circuit. When we engage reverse gear, the ISO socket will power the camera. This method does not require removing the backlights of the car, as the camera will not be powered by them. We connect the male FACRA Type-C adapter to the male SMA connector, to transmit the signal from the GPS antenna of the car to the Android radio. Once the antenna is placed, we can check the strength of the GPS signal with an application such as GPS Test Plus. We can also check the signal using any navigator, such as Google Maps. We plug the female FACRA connector of the car radio antenna, with the male FACRA connector of the radio, in which we had previously soldered the power cable to the amplifier. The radio adapter has two male FACRA sockets for the radio, and we cannot tell what the difference is between them. Nevertheless, we check in one of them that the radio signal is strong enough. If we are not satisfied with the quality of the signal, we can buy a better amplifier. Almost all amplifiers have the same connectors. In any case, if we have problems with the tuning of radio stations, we can download any radio application from the Play Store, which receives the signal from Wi-Fi. In this case, we will have to share the Wi-Fi signal of our mobile with the radio so that these applications work correctly. With all the connections already made, we prepare the fitting of the radio. We have to cut the bottom of the original box with a small saw to make room in order to insert all the cables. We must also cover the floor of the box with duct tape to prevent any cable from slipping into the holes. If this happens, we will have serious problems removing the radio in the future. We apply electrical tape in order to cover all loose cables of the ISO connector, to prevent any short circuit. We must also use zip ties to join all the cables, so that they are not loose inside the box. We could cut and remove all the connectors that we are not going to use, but this would not let us return the product later if it has a fault. It is recommended not to fit the radio completely, until we have checked the right functioning of the device. And that is all. Thanks.